Get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Divya Pawar and I'm a trading coordinator at the Temple Small Business Development Center. We help small businesses start and grow, and we're doing this through consulting over the phone or through Zoom and with a robust calendar of training events. You are here for the Food Business Series, Principles of Food Marketing. This workshop is the first in the 9-part series, and it will cover the marketing planning process in detail. We will also have office hours, as George suggested, at the next day of the webinar from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. I will also put the link in the chat. This webinar will be presented by Tandem Associates, and with that, I will turn the floor to George.
Thank you, Divya. So welcome, everybody. Unfortunately, I can't see you, but I definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. So again, please use the Q&A and also the chat. There are a couple of things that I'm going to build in so we can at least be a little interactive here. And again, as I said, we'll talk about the office hours later, but that is your chance to really get this Thursday, tomorrow night. I'll be on for 2 hours. And again, you just pop in, we just have a conversation. You can see me, I can see you. So again, thank you, Divya, and thank you to Temple Small Business Development. Tonight, we're going to talk about food marketing strategy. And just to kind of give you an idea of how the next 3 hours are going to go here, hopefully you can hang in for the whole time. We'll probably go for about an hour and a half or so. We'll take about a 10 or 15-minute break in the middle, so you can get a chance to grab something to eat, maybe go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to do at that point. But we will definitely have a hard stop no later than 8 o'clock tonight. And also, these slides will be uploaded to the SBDC website and available to everybody who registered. So you will have the ability to download these slides probably tomorrow. So Divya talked a little bit about why we're here, but again, I want to thank the Temple Small Business Development Center. They were able to secure a grant from the government, from the CARES Act, and that's why we're offering this to you all free of charge. The office hours are free of charge as well. So you're going to hear me say multiple times, if you have an existing business, if you have a business plan, or if you're thinking about starting a business, please make sure you use Temple Small Business Development if you're in the Philadelphia area. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. For those of you that are not in the area here, you want to connect with your local Small Business Development Center, and they will be able to offer the same services the Temple offers here, but the services are free. So we'll talk about that numerous times throughout the webinar tonight and also going forward. So I want you to read this a little bit, and then we'll talk about it, just how the world has changed over the last 20 years or so. Certainly it's changed in the last year. So I thought this was an appropriate way to kick everything off, since we're talking about food marketing here. And you'll hear me say many times, it's really important to understand what problems you solve for the customer and the consumer. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're thinking about developing a product that you're going to sell through another channel, like a retail channel, that retailer is your customer, and the person who consumes the product is called the consumer. If you already have a business, maybe you have a food truck or a restaurant or a food cart, or go to farmers markets or something like that, then obviously the people that buy your product are your customer and consumer. So you really need to to understand which is which. But again, think about what the world is like today. Over the past year, I've had my two adult children still living with me, and one moved back with my son-in-law and my grandson, and we also have my mother-in-law living in the house. So we have a pretty full house here in the Latella household. I have to say, probably 4 or 5 times a week, a box shows up from Amazon at our doorstep that I did not order. So I thought this is a pretty appropriate way to start everything here. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am here representing Tandem Associates and also Temple Small Business Development. But I teach food marketing full-time at St. Joe's University in Philadelphia. So I'm guessing most of you all are from the Philadelphia area, but St. Joe's has had a food marketing program for almost 60 years. And I've been teaching in the program for about half that time, for about 30 years. In addition, I worked 22 years at Tasty Cake. I ran sales and marketing for Tasty Cake. So very familiar with developing products, very familiar with advertising, marketing research. I ran the sales team, so I'm very familiar with all the customers, primarily in the US, but also from a global footprint as well. So I have a lot of experience in the business. I like to say I practice what I teach. I am not a PhD, very proud of the fact that I am not a PhD. But again, all the classes I teach and all the webinars we've developed for small business development are things that I've actually done. So I think that's what you really need to know about me. My partner, who's not on tonight, Mark Plamond, and if you join next week, Mark's going to lead the webinar next week on branding. And Mark's background is primarily in marketing communications and advertising and outsourced marketing. So for the last 26 years, he's basically had his own company. And if you look down the bottom, you can see all the different brands that big brands that Mark's been responsible for. And Mark and I met many years ago at Tasty Cake. Mark actually ran all of my marketing communications for Tasty Cake. So for those of you that are old enough to remember, nobody bakes a cake as tasty as a Tasty Cake. Mark worked for the advertising agency that developed that for us back in the 1980s. So Mark has a lot of great experience as well. And I think we're a pretty good tag team because I have the sales and marketing piece and Mark has the marketing communications piece as well. So we both teach strategy. We both actually do strategy. We both consult around strategy for food companies. So a lot of great experience from both of us. And for those of you that are going to attend, multiple webinars, and certainly at the end of this, when we do our boot camp, we try to bring in subject matter experts as well beyond just Mark and myself. So this is a picture I took last summer. I happened to be down the shore this weekend for the 4th of July. But this is a picture of the sunrise in Wildwood Crest, so South Jersey, Wildwood Crest. And I thought this was an appropriate way to start us off today. I am a very positive person. I am a half full, not a half empty person. So I just thought this was a good way to kick everything off. And I used this actually last September at the beginning of our fall semester at St. Joe's. So just wanted to keep everybody in mind. We have to think positive. So you'll hear me say multiple times, especially tonight, in order to be successful in marketing, you really need to solve the problems of your customer. So it's my job tonight to kind of take you through the marketing planning process or food marketing strategic planning process and really help you understand the kinds of things you need to do and the information you need to have to be successful. Okay, you'll hear me say that many, many times. So understand who your customer is and understand what problem you solve for the customer. Really, really important. So I just showed you a quick picture. Somebody jump on the chat and tell me if they think something bad is happening or something good is happening. Just put bad or good in the chat. Geraldine, you saw this before. You're not allowed to answer. Wow, everybody's saying good. I left it up there too soon, too much. All right, great. So the answer is good, but I like to say I use this slide for perceptions reality because a lot of times people look at that and think that the lion is eating something when she's really just carrying her cub. So that's my thing of perceptions reality. I'm going to spend a lot of time tonight talking about this concept of perceptions reality. I also like to say I'm an old wise guy, so I know you can only see me from the neck up here, but I've been in the business for over 35 years. I've done a lot of things. I've made a lot of mistakes, also had a lot of successes in my time. But here's how I define wisdom: age plus mistakes. So it's my job to hopefully minimize the mistakes you're going to make, but you will make mistakes. Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying. Obviously, you don't want to make the same mistake twice, and you want to try to minimize those, but we definitely want to learn from our mistakes. So please, as I said, I am not a PhD. Don't call me doctor. You can call me George. You can call me Mr. You can call me Professor. You can call me Latella, or you can call me Pop Latella. So I am a grandfather too. I answer to a lot of names, but I don't answer to Dr. Latella. And this is my grandson, Joseph, using my laptop in my chair. So I have an office in my house And sometimes I sit in my chair with my laptop, and he joined me and showed me how to use the laptop a couple days ago. Okay, so just the fact that you all are joining, taking time out of a night on a Wednesday night midweek tells me that you're somebody who wants to make things happen. But basically, there's three kinds of people: people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who wonder what happened. Now, as we dive a little deeper into the subject tonight, you need to be all three of these people at some point in your development and planning process. You obviously have to ask questions. It's always good to ask questions. It's always good to watch what's going on around you. So I'm not saying you don't want to do that, but ultimately you need to make something happen. And the way you make something happen is to plan your work and work your plan. So I like to say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And life is a series of choices, decisions, and consequences. So for those of you that are thinking about starting a business, obviously, maybe you've invested a little bit of money, maybe you've invested a little bit of time, maybe you've invested a lot of both, but you have choices to make, right? So we want to make sure that we evaluate those choices properly, and hopefully you make more good decisions than bad decisions. And hopefully you have more positive consequences than negative consequences. But I will tell you, if you don't have a plan, you will fail. You need to have a plan. You need to have a roadmap. Okay. And again, for those of you that are a little further along, maybe you have a strategic plan, or maybe you have a corporate strategy plan, or maybe you don't. But you really can't start with a product plan and then roll into a strategic plan. You really need to start at the top with a strategy and then kind of work backwards. And again, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the strategic planning process, I have a couple of slides at the end of the presentation that'll make it pretty clear for you what you need to do. So what problem do I solve for you? Well, I like to say an education is worthless, but an applied education is priceless. For those of you that are familiar with Rosati water ice, if you grew up in Philadelphia, it's the water ice that used to be sold in a little plastic container with a wooden spoon. So the president of that company now, the owner of that company, this is his quote, Rich Trotter. And I love this quote because you have to take what you learn and be able to apply it. That is the key part, right? Applied learning, really, really important. So again, just the fact that you're with us tonight, I think says a lot about you. The other key to success is you have to be able to answer these three questions. So what, why, and how? Regardless of where you're on the process, you obviously had an idea to do this. Maybe somebody told you make the best pie or the best jelly or the best jam or hot sauce or whatever it is. And maybe you went off and did some research. So the so what is all these data points. And we spent a little bit of time in this session, but a lot of time in later sessions talking about how to gather data, where to gather data, good sources of data. So you have all these data points. Maybe it's articles, maybe it's trade publications. Again, maybe you have a business that you're already talking to customers about. So you get a piece of information and you ask yourself, so what? And a big part of the success in marketing planning is being able to analyze and interpret data. And that's where the why comes in. So you have all these data points, you have all these trends, you have all these charts. So what does this mean? That's the first question. The second thing, why, is why do you feel that way? You have to have an opinion, right? I like to call it fact-based decision-making or fact-based selling. When we get to the class in sales, we talk about fact-based selling. And then finally, the how is how are you going to take that information and how are you going to implement? So again, a big part of what we talk about from marketing planning, we call it the 4 P's of marketing: product strategy, pricing strategy, promotion strategy, and place or physical distribution strategy. So the implementation thing is really, really, really important because that's where a lot of people kind of fall down and fail. The other thing we talk about is this concept called the CEO model: customers, employees, and owners. And again, I realize many of you are entrepreneurs, you're probably starting off on your own, but at some point you're either going to have people working for you, maybe now or certainly down the road. And you need to take into account all 3 people: the customer and consumer, people that work for you, and people that own the company. So if you're going to get money from a bank, if you're going to get money from a friend or relative, they're a part owner of the business. That blue circle is the community. So again, depending on where you're located, the community could be where you're located, the community can be where you're going to put your business, the community could be where you're going to make your product, and they could be 3 different places. And then finally, society at large, the big picture. So the first thing we do when we think about planning is we have to have a mission and vision. Why are we here? What's the mission of your company? Where do you want to take the company? The next thing we do is something called a situation analysis. And I have multiple slides on this at the end of the presentation, but basically the situation analysis is taking a look at internal, so things you do and you know and you can control, and then external, things outside of your control, things like the political arena, the economy, social trends, technology, legal. So that's the situation analysis. So we look inside the company and outside the company. And then once we do that, we create our objectives, we craft our strategy, we implement our strategy, that's the how, and then we figure out whether we were successful or not in creating value, and then we go back and do it all over again. So if you think of a revolving circle or a constant loop, that's what marketing is. Marketing is a race with no finish line. I say that all the time. We keep going and going and going, and we keep emphasizing the things that work well, and we change the things that don't work well. So let me stop there before I move on. Any questions on anything I covered so far? Anybody need any clarification on anything? Pretty straightforward, but I want to make sure we're allowing some time for that. All right, great. So how do we define marketing? Well, okay, the formal, Jocelyn, yes, please ask a question either in the chat or the Q&A. That would be great. Happy to answer the question. Marketing is defined as the planning and executing and the conception of pricing, promotion, distribution to create exchanges. So I like to say marketing is the facilitation of exchange. And it's really to, again, figure out what problems you solve for the customer, and then you solve those problems better than anybody else. So marketing is more than a series of activities. It's really a company-wide philosophy. And as I said, I think marketing is the facilitation of exchange. It's our job as marketers to make everything easier. Jocelyn had a question, great question. Do focus groups fit in the assessment of value creation and feedback? Yes. So focus group, if you're not familiar, a focus group is when, typically not you, but you hire a company to do that, a professional researcher, to recruit the kind of people that you want to talk to. So we'll call them the target market. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And typically with a focus group, we gather people around a table, either in an office building or in a facility, and we have a series of questions that we ask. So if you've ever seen the focus groups on television or maybe participated, that's called qualitative research, qualitative, because the answers we get from focus groups are not able to be measured. If you've ever filled out a survey on a 5-point scale or a 7-point scale or a 10-point scale or yes or no, or things that are finite answers, that's called quantitative research, and that we can measure. So if you've ever seen advertising where it says, 83% of people prefer Coke over Pepsi, or 55% of all doctors recommend X, that would be an example of quantitative research. Great question, Jocelyn. Thank you. Keep them coming. So marketing is not selling, advertising, creating needs. It's not doing that. It's creating value. And the way we create value from a marketing standpoint is understand who your customer and consumers are, understand what needs and wants they have or problems they have, and solve those problems better than the competition. So this is probably the only textbooky kind of thing that I include in my presentation, because this is basically a schematic of the marketing process. Everything we teach in marketing comes off of this slide. So at the top, we have the 5 C's. Again, You have to know who your customers are. You have to know what company you're, involved with, who your competitors are, who you're working with, who's going to be collaborative with you, and in what context that your company, product, or service exists. Underneath that is where we create value. And the way we create value is being able to segment customers. So the way we think about segmentation is how people are similar or different. So typically the ways we segment are demographics, and those are descriptors. So again, tall, thin, black, white, rich, poor, educated, not educated, lives in a big city, lives in a rural, lives on a farm, lives in suburban, urban, lives in a warm climate, lives in a cold climate, lives in the US, lives around the world. Those are things, those are hard numbers. Those are called descriptors. That's one way to do it. The second way to do it is from a behavioral standpoint. So again, if you think about this from a food standpoint, we can segment people based off of their purchasing behavior or based off of their consumption behavior. So think about somebody that smokes cigarettes. Well, people that smoke cigarettes are going to smoke a lot more cigarettes than people that don't smoke cigarettes. And then within the people that smoke cigarettes, there's people that might smoke a couple packs a day, maybe people that smoke a pack a day, maybe people only smoke a couple cigarettes a day, and maybe some people are just social smokers. So that would be an example of segmenting based off of behavior or consumption. And then the other way we think about this we call it psychographic, or attitudes, interests, and opinions. So you and I can look totally different. You and I can be different age, different race, different ethnicity, different gender. But if we like to ski, or if we lead an active lifestyle, that would be an example of a psychographic. Aggressive people versus conservative people, passive people versus aggressive people, those kinds of things. So once we put people into groups, then we figure out who we're going after and why. That's called the target market. So if you think of a grocery store, again, I'm assuming most of you guys are from the Northeast. So you may be familiar with Acme, ShopRite, Giant, Wegmans, Walmart, obviously Target, those kinds of places. The people that shop in those stores traditionally in grocery stores have been older people. More specifically, older people with families with children. They buy more food than people that don't have children. People that have, teenagers and older children buy more food than people that have infants. People that have infants buy more diapers than people that don't have infants. So there's a lot of different ways that we can segment. But just because older people shop at grocery stores more than younger people doesn't mean that younger people can't be our target market. In fact, most grocery stores have been going after millennials and now Gen Z. So basically people from the age of 20 to 40. That's been the hot topic and the hot market in food for quite some time. So that's our target. And then finally, we have this concept called positioning. And positioning happens between the ears. Positioning happens in the mind of the consumer. That's where the perception is formed. So positioning means when you see a brand, when you hear a brand, when you hear words, when you hear commercials, you have an image in your head. That again, that's the brand perception. Jocelyn, do I think old people shop at Wegmans? Yes. Although I will say Wegmans definitely attracts more younger people than, let's say, an Acme or a Giant or a ShopRite for sure. Great question. Keep them coming. So then we have the 4 Ps here. And the 4 Ps, as I talked about, are product strategy, place, where does it go? What kind of channel? Are you going to go to a grocery store? You're going to go to a C store? You're going to go to a club store? How are you going to communicate? How are you going to promote your product? And then how are you going to price the product? But ultimately, all this stuff, and this is the reason why I have it circled in red, the most important thing we have to do here is get customers. That's called customer acquisition. And then once we get customers, we have to keep customers. That's called customer retention. And then finally, we have to develop customers. So there should be another box over here called acquire, retain, develop. If we do our job of understanding the 5 Cs, understanding how to group people, which groups we're going to go after, and how we're going to communicate with them, If we have the right product in the right place on the shelf, in the right store, with the right communication and the right price, we're going to get customers, we're going to keep customers, and we're going to develop customers, and ultimately we're going to make money. Obviously, we're in business to make, to make a profit. Okay, so when I teach food marketing, and hopefully many of you guys have seen The Longest Yard, either the movie with Burt Reynolds or the movie with Adam Sandler. That's not what I'm talking about here, okay? When I think of The Longest Yard, I think of the last 3 feet between the shelf and the shopping cart. So again, think about, for those of you that go to a store, I know some of you guys get the food coming to you, which is why I put that cartoon up, but you still have to get your phone out or your iPad or your laptop. You still have to do something. So think of the last 3 feet as getting your phone out and placing an order, or your laptop or your tablet or whatever. If you do go to a store and you do walk around a store, the last 3 feet between the shelf and the shopping cart is really important. Think about how many products are in a grocery store. Think about how many products are in a Walmart or a Target or a Costco or even a Wawa or 7-Eleven or Sheetz or Cumberland Farms, Royal Farms, all those convenience stores. They have a lot of products in there. Now, unless you're going specifically for a specific product and you know you're going to the store and you're going to buy Maxwell House coffee, generally a lot of decisions are made in the store. People decide what store they're going to go to, but they don't necessarily know everything they're going to buy. So I think The Longest Yard, again, is that last 3 feet. Or again, if you think about interacting with your phone, it's getting your phone out and going to somebody's website and putting something in the shopping cart and then saying buy, or or click and collect, or things like that. So think about how this has really changed over the past 6 months. Again, depending on where you're living, we are finally getting back to the new normal. The question is, how far are we going to get back and how fast? So if you think back to last March, 15 months ago, the world basically stopped. All of us were home. We had a shelter in place. We were allowed to leave our homes to go to food stores to buy food, or we did have the food come to us. Otherwise, nothing else was going on. So a lot of consumer behavior changed dramatically 15 months ago. Everybody went to grocery stores. Everybody went to Walmart. Everybody went to Lowe's and Home Depot and those stores that were open. Or if you didn't go to those stores, you had the product come to you. For those of you that like to eat out, DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, Caviar, Plated, Home Chef, HelloFresh, Blue Apron. I'm trying to think of all these online companies, Fresh Direct, Peapod, Shop Right From Home. All these companies exploded because people needed the food to come to them. So now, as everything started to open back up in May, and I don't have the answer to this question. If I did, I'd be on an island somewhere sipping a cocktail. But how fast are people going to come back to the behaviors that we had before? People that never went to a grocery store but went over the last year because they had to, are they going to keep going to a grocery store? Maybe people that never used e-commerce before and had to have the food come to them, are they going to go back to a grocery store, or are they going to keep using the computer to have the food come to them? So a lot of changes are going on, not only from where we get the food, but how we get the food, how we pay for the food, how we prepare the food, how we dispose of the food. Think about all those things that have changed. Again, you want to try to identify things that fit with your product or service for sure. If we think about communication, what we communicate has not changed. When I went to school a million years ago, the marketing professor told me the goal of marketing communication is to inform, persuade, and remind, right? Inform, persuade, remind. Just go back and look at old commercials from the 70s or 80s or even 90s, right? We want to provide consumers with information. We want to persuade them to buy our product. And if they're already buying our product, we want to remind them to come back and buy it again. Inform, persuade, remind. Today, we live in the digital age. And when we think of digital, we think of 3 words: stop, compel, and engage. I want to stop you in your tracks. I want to compel you to get your phone out and flip through the screen or scroll up or scroll down, whichever way you do it. And then I want you to engage and share what I'm giving you with your friends in your network. Share it, like it, tag it. Stop, compel, engage. So communication in the digital age. And I have my own language. We call it the Latella language. It's think, feel, and do. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Inform, persuade, remind. Stop, compel, engage. Think, feel, do. It all means the same thing. You need to get people to think about your product. That's in the head, right? That's the rational. You need them to feel something about the product. That's the emotional. So you go from the head to the heart. And then you want them to get them off their rear end. You want them to do something. Go to your website, buy your product if you have an e-commerce site. Go to Amazon, go to a grocery store, go to a delivery service. So think, feel, and do. Really, really, really important. So here's an example back on my so what, why, and how. And you'll see here down the bottom. So this is actually almost 5 years old. This is from August 2016. So you may see that there's actually no TikTok up here because TikTok did not exist 5 years ago. But what this is a data point or a chart that you could use if you're thinking about social media. So this is basically the social media platforms by generation. And it compares millennials. So I'm guessing a lot of you guys are in here. People born between 1980 and 1996. And it compares them with Gen Z, people born from 1997 to basically 2003. So if we think of this now, the youngest Gen Z people are just starting college now or just turning 18. So this runs all the way from 18-year-olds to 40-year-olds. Okay, think of it that way. So just let's take a look. Everybody's probably most familiar with Facebook. If you came back without this data and said, we're going to have a social media communication strategy and we're going to advertise on Facebook, I would say, great, who's your target market? If your target market is people that are 35 to 40, yes, makes sense, at least if this data was correct today. But if you're talking about people that are 18 to 22, they don't go on Facebook. So again, before TikTok, because this generation is the TikTok generation, and the kids that are under 18 are definitely the TikTok generation. But they were on YouTube, they were on Instagram, they were on Snapchat. Some of you guys may not even be familiar with some of these things. This is where you need to understand who's your customer, what problem do you solve for them. So again, this is a so what, why, and how, a great example of that. If you've identified older millennials, yes, Facebook. But if you're going after young Gen Z, no Facebook. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about strategy. When I think of strategy, and again, for those of you that remember your history, and we study maybe military or wars or things like that, a lot of what we teach marketing strategy around comes from military strategy. So think of the game plan, or for those of you that are athletes, either former athletes or current athletes, this is the game plan. This is the game plan. This is how we are going to beat the competition. So the strategy, and again, I don't want to get into a huge football discussion here, but think about one of the people who I hate because I'm an Eagles fan, although we beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, hate Bill Belichick. But I also love Bill Belichick from a strategy standpoint because he's a great example of developing a plan. Now, time will tell whether Belichick had the great plan or Tom Brady, Belichick had Brady and he could have had anything happen. But I always think that New England Patriots are a great example of developing a strategy, stacking the odds in your favor. So when I think about the central role of marketing, it's basically the process of how we create value. We create value by meeting and exceeding customer needs. So we don't define ourselves by what we make. We don't define ourselves by what we sell. We define ourselves by what benefit we provide to the customer. And I like to say benefits equal solutions to problems. So if we are able to create value, and again, this is perceived value, we're able to capture that through profit. And we'll talk about a couple brands in a minute that I think do a great job of doing that. And then once we create value, we have to capture that value and sustain that over time. That's the key. So Sam Walton has a great quote, and the quote is, "A customer is not a customer until they come back a second time." A repeat customer. Great quote from Sam Walton. So when we talk about value, there's basically 3 different value disciplines. The first one's called operational excellence. When I think of operational excellence, a couple companies come to mind: McDonald's and Walmart. Great companies with operational excellence. Wawa, for those of you that are in this area. Those companies are really good at identifying processes and putting processes in place to speed up the service, which provides a benefit to consumers and also allows them to keep the price low. So that's one, operational excellence. The second is customer intimacy. There's nobody better than Amazon. Again, I'm guessing most of you all are Amazon Prime members, but if you're not, you're familiar with Amazon. They have better data probably than the federal government. So I think they're really good at identifying who their customers are. If you've ever bought anything on Amazon, you'll notice down the bottom, it always says, customers who bought this also bought that. Customer intimacy. And then when I think of product leadership, I think of Apple. Again, there's other companies that I think do that, but if you think of those brands, you're either good at operational excellence, customer intimacy, or product leadership. Now, you can be good at 2 or 3 of these, but you can't excel at all 3. You really can't excel at all 3. So figure out how you create value, really important. The other way we think about this is it's going to cost you something to develop your product or service, right? We call that the cost of sales or the cost of goods sold. And then through the product and the price and the promotion and the place, the 4 Ps, this is where we create value. And this is what the customer pays up here. So again, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but you can create value a couple different ways. You can control your cost and lower your cost and provide a lower price. That's certainly one way to create value. Or you can go the other way and say, there's nothing like my product. Nobody else has anything that compares to my product, and you're going to pay even more for this product. So Jocelyn, I'm not sure what's happening. I haven't heard from anybody else about the visual. You might want to try to log out and log back in. I think you're the only one that is having a problem with the visual. Sorry about that. Okay, so when I think of how marketing creates value, again, we can create value in where we place the product or how we get the product to people. We can create value with the actual product itself. Maybe it's via warranty, maybe it's better quality, maybe it's different ingredients. We can create value from how we communicate, and we can create value from how we price the product as well. Again, I like to say value is benefits received over burdens endured. What does that mean? Well, this means what do I get? What benefit do I get? And what do I have to go through to get that? Okay, benefits received, burdens endured. That's how I think of value. So I tell my students all the time, you know, semesters are 15 weeks long. Students that sign up for my food marketing class have to listen to me for 15 weeks. Hopefully at the end of the 15 weeks, they've actually learned something. So that's the benefit they get from having to listen to me for 15 weeks. So think of it that way. Or think about if you're hungry and you really are craving Chick-fil-A. So Chick-fil-A is a great brand, a great brand. But in order to get to the Chick-fil-A, you have to drive by McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Taco Bell, KFC, Qdoba, Subway. Well, wow. So that's the burden. The burden is you have to drive a little further, but the benefit is you're going to get a really good sandwich or a really good experience or really good nuggets. So think of it that way. What do you get? What benefit do you get? And what do you have to go through to get it? So a couple of different people, if you're familiar with Warren Buffett, he runs Berkshire Hathaway, great quote. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. So this is another great quote, or the traditional thing is perceived benefits over cost or perceived quality over cost. Great quote from Albert Einstein. If you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. So again, I kind of call this my lowest common denominator slide. When you come up with your concept, when you are talking to consumers about your product or your concept, they have to be able to get it right away. Think about yourselves. Think about yourselves as a consumer. You really have to understand what you're getting. And if you understand it, maybe you buy it. But certainly if you don't understand it, we're not going to work really hard to understand what's going on. Okay, probably the most important slide of tonight's webinar. That's why I call this my money slide. You have to be able to answer these 4 questions. Who you are, what you do, how you're different, and why you're better. Or said differently, what problems do you solve better for the customer and the consumer? So I'm going to come back and say, if you're thinking about developing a product that's going to be sold through a retailer, you need to understand who that retailer's customer is and tell her or him why your product solves their problem better. For example, when I was at Tasty Cake, our #1 account was Wawa. And the reason why Wawa was our #1 account was our brands were strong in the same area, and our product resonated with the Wawa customer. So Tasty Cake was an individually wrapped, convenient, consumable snack. Not healthy, indulgent. Convenient, consumable, indulgent snack. Wawa sells convenience. Wawa sells indulgence. Wawa sells food. So we were able to go to Wawa and say, our customer is your customer. And that's the problem that we solve for them. All right, let's talk about this concept called economic value proposition, another really important concept. There are basically 3 things that you give the consumers. You give them less of something, the same of something, or more of something. And there's basically 3 things that they give you: less money, the same money, or more money. So what do I mean by that? Well, again, there are really relatively few really new products in food. So there's going to be some comparison or some reference that people are going to make when you present your product to them. So let's use hot sauce as an example. If you go to a grocery store, or you go to Trader Joe's, or you go to Whole Foods, or you go to Walmart or whoever, and you say, I have the best hot sauce in the world, they're going to compare you to somebody. Maybe the somebody is Frank's. Maybe the somebody is Stubbs. Maybe the somebody is McElhenney. Maybe the somebody is Tabasco, or maybe it's some other smaller brand that I've never heard of. So you're going to give them less of something, the same of something, or more of something, and then they're going to decide whether they give you less money, the same money, or more money. So what I'd like you to think about is, can you identify a food brand that gives consumers more of something, but is also able to charge them more for that something, more for more? So just go in the chat and just type in a brand that's able to give consumers more of something, but also able to collect more money. All right, Natalie, Nike, we're not talking shoes, but I like Nike. Certainly more for more. Shannon, Costco, interesting. I think when I think of Costco, I don't think of Costco as more for more. I know you're saying it's larger quantity and they charge more money, but if you look at it on a per unit basis, Costco is going to say they give you same for less. Cheesecake Factory is a great one, Stacy. Starbucks, Trish, yes. Brittany, Ben & Jerry's, yes, yes, yes. So if I was giving you guys grades, it would be A on that. So let's talk about the 3 of them. What is it that Cheesecake Factory gives people more of? For those of you that are in the Cheesecake Factory, what is it about Cheesecake Factory? Because they certainly charge more money for what they, what they're presenting. What do you think Cheesecake Factory, what's the more that Cheesecake Factory gives? All right, menu is huge, yes, for sure. So variety. I don't want to say something for everybody, but almost everybody can find something at Cheesecake Factory. How about Starbucks? Starbucks is always a good one for me. What's the more for more? Okay, customization for sure. What else? Starbucks, more for more. Definitely easy access. So convenience is one, variety, yes. All good answers. Ben & Jerry's is another great one. Ben & Jerry's is considered super premium ice cream. The reason why Ben & Jerry's tastes so good is because it has a lot of fat in it. And fat, for those of you that are familiar with the science of food, fat is what we give the mouthfeel. So that's why we have fatty foods we crave, because it's really tastes good when we go in our mouth. Things like butter or lard or margarine or oils or things like that. That's why we crave that, because it's mouthfeel. Same thing with ice cream. Or for those of you that like whole milk tastes a lot better than skim milk because of the fat. I mean, milk is milk. So it's the fat level that's in the milk. Kim, I love that. Whole paycheck, yes. Whole Foods is more for more. So again, you actually have a great answer in there. Whole Foods is giving people the perception of better health because of natural and organic. Natural and organic foods are not always better for you, but the perception is that they are. So this is great. You guys are all getting all good stuff. So more for more, I think we've got, right? More for more is Apple, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A. We had Whole Foods on there. We had Cheesecake Factory on there, Ben & Jerry's, all more for more. Let's go in the other box. So jump back on the chat and give me an example of a food company that's less for less. Doesn't have to be a brand. It can be a brand, but can also be a retailer. Less for less. Brittany, number one answer, dollar store. Thank you. Keep coming. Save a Lot, Aldi. Ramen, yes, Adam, ramen for sure. Great answers. So let me talk a little bit about Save a Lot and Aldi. I actually think, again, back on the Costco thing, they would say they're giving people same for less. They're giving people same for less. Think about that. How does Aldi or Save a Lot or Trader Joe's or Bottom Dollar or Price Right, what are they giving people? They're basically saying, hey, you can save 20, 30, 40% on the national brands. Or dollar stores, I definitely think dollar stores are less for less, because they're giving you either less quantity or less quality, and they're only charging you $1. So if you think of something like Tide detergent, Tide sold all over the place. You can get Tide in a dollar store, but it's basically like a single serve pouch of Tide. So you're getting less of something and you're paying less, okay? So let me come back to this grid here. Great. So there's two places where we can make money, a lot of money. This is called a premium product for premium price positioning. So Starbucks is able to sell coffee for $3, $4, $5 a cup. If I told you that the stuff that was in that cup, that 20-ounce cup of Starbucks, the venti, the stuff that's in the cup costs the same at Starbucks as it does at Dunkin' or McDonald's or Wawa, the actual coffee costs the same. What Starbucks is selling is the perception. It's the badge. It's the mermaid. People are walking around with that Starbucks cup and saying, I can afford a $5 cup of coffee and you can't. I tell my students this all the time. I teach 8 o'clock classes. When I go to class, I still have a Mr. Coffee coffee pot in my house. I make 14 cups of coffee every day. We probably make a second pot of coffee in our house because we have like 8 adults in the house. It costs me a lot less to make a full pot of coffee with a coffee maker than it does for 1 cup of coffee at Starbucks. But my students are walking around with that badge, the mermaid badge. That's what I call it, all right? So the only place when you're thinking about your strategy, how you're going to create value, the only place that I will tell you you never, ever, 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 ever want to be is same for same. Because you're going to go to somebody and say, I have a product that does the same thing as company brand X, and I'm going to charge the same amount of money as brand X. Well, the customer, the retailer is going to say, why would I carry your hot sauce when I already have hot sauce? It does the same thing. you have no difference. So the only thing, the only box you never want to be in is the same for same. So this is, again, a really important slide as well. Let me stop there for a second. Any questions on this? All right, great. So again, we're talking about food marketing here. And this is my quote. I really believe this quote. We are not in the food business serving people. We are in the people business serving food. So I understand that a lot of people kind of hide behind their phones. We have a lot of introverts now, but make no mistake, you need to make a connection with the customer and you need to make a connection with the consumer. And if you're able to form that relationship, you own that relationship. So that's why I like to say we are not in the food business serving people. We are in the people business serving food. So for those of you that are small businesses, for those of you that are entrepreneurs, a big company cannot be you. They cannot copy you. They are definitely not going to know their customers as well as you know your customers, because you're the one that's making the sales call. You're the one that's making the product. You're the one that's talking to people. So I do think customer service is really, really, really important. Okay, so let's talk again about how do we drive retail. I'm actually going to start off at the bottom here. So we're going to work our way up. So you go to any store, does not matter what kind of store you go to. In this case, we're talking about food stores. Somebody is going to go to that store and buy something. We call a package or a box or a bag or whatever a unit. Somebody's going to go in and buy a package, a box, or a bag, or multiple things each time they go to the store. That's called units per trip, okay? We have to pay. Typically, we pay money in the United States. We pay currency, we pay cash. So we multiply what that unit cost is, the dollars per unit, times the units per trip, and that equals the dollars per trip, okay? So it costs $2 a box. We buy 2 boxes. $2 times 2 boxes equals $4, all right? That's the actual transaction. And then we multiply the dollars per trip. So how much do we spend every time we go versus the number of items that we buy per household. And that gives us the buying rate. That gives us the dollars per household. Then we figure out how many people are buying our product, how many households are buying, and we multiply the number of households times the dollars per household, and that's how we get dollar sales. It's a really basic concept. Again, we want to get people in the store. We want to get people to buy our product. We want to get people to come back and buy our product over and over and over again. So said a little differently, there's a couple terms you really need to understand if you're going to sell, either create your own retail store or sell to a retailer. And one is called basket size. The second is called loyalty. And the third is called frequency. So basket size means that when your product is in the shopping cart or in the basket, the consumer spends a certain amount of money. So the grocery stores, the Wawas, every retail store has an idea of what their average basket size is. Or if we're thinking of restaurants or food service, we call that average check size. So the easiest way to understand that is if you go to a dollar store, your basket size is not going to be as big as if you go to an Aldi. If you go to an Aldi, your basket's not going to be as big as if you go to a grocery store. If you go to a grocery store, your basket's not going to be as big as if you go to a club store or a Walmart or Target. So that's called basket size. The second concept is called loyalty. There are very few people, if any, who only buy everything at one store. Like they only get all their stuff on Amazon. They only get all their stuff at Walmart. So we shop at multiple stores. We shop at multiple channels. So can we get people to come back and be more loyal to us? So loyalty is really a concept you need to understand. And then frequency. How often are people shopping? So again, think about a convenience store like a Wawa, 7-Eleven, Quick Check, Royal Farms, Sheetz, Cumberland Farms, Circle K, depending on where you're from. You know, people that go to a convenience store are going to go there a couple times a week. Some people, in fact, go to convenience stores a couple times a day. They get breakfast there in the morning, they get lunch there, maybe they get a pack of cigarettes, they get a bag of chips, they buy a lottery ticket, they go to the bathroom, they get a can of beer, whatever it is. So people go to a convenience store much more frequently than they go to a grocery store or a club store like a Costco or a Walmart or a BJ's. So you really need to understand the retail environment that you're in. So again, basket size, loyalty, frequency, really important concepts. Again, acquisition, retention, development. This is going to be the second time you hear this. You have to go to a food store and say, I am going to help you get new customers, or I am going to help you keep new customers, or I am going to help you develop customers. Because when my hot sauce is in the basket, people also buy meat or seafood or chicken or turkey or pork. And when they buy pork, they buy chips, they buy potatoes, they buy asparagus, they buy whatever. So we call these complementary items. So it's just when your product is in the basket, what other things are in the basket? That's really important. Acquire, retain, develop. So I like to say there's no such things as commodity products, only commodity marketers. And I'll give you an example of that. You definitely want to make what will sell. You don't want to sell what you make. Okay? People only buy two things. They buy good feelings and they buy solutions to problems. You have to think about how your brand is going to address those two things. So again, think about your own personal experience as a consumer. You buy things because they make you feel good. You know, again, maybe it's indulgent, maybe it's sweet, maybe it's savory, and it's a solution to a problem. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm sick, I'm angry, I'm happy. There's a lot of different things here, okay? Good feeling, solutions to problems. All right, so let's talk about the power of W in food. Before I go to the next slide, can somebody jump on the chat and give me a retailer in your area that's very powerful, food retailer that begins with the letter W. Food retailer begins with the letter W. All right, Wegmans, Brittany, yes. Kim, Walmart, yes. Whole Foods. Wawa, Adam, yes. Wawa in the Northeast, actually up and down the East Coast now, Wawa. How about if I said drugstore? What drugstore begins with W that also sells food? Thank you. Okay, all right. Power of W in food. So we got all five. Okay, and for those of you that are not from the Northeast, Wegmans is a great grocery retailer in the Northeast. So let's play a little game here. Okay, we're going to talk about how each of these creates value. If I said which of these brands has the lowest price, they create value from low price, you would say what? Just jump on the chat. Low price. Great. Okay. Walmart's definitely low price. If I said which of these brands creates value from giving people natural and organic healthy food, you would say what? Which brand? Wow, that was quick. Okay. Yes, Whole Foods. Which brand gives convenience? Awesome. And then how about, again, we talk about experience, however you define experience, which of these brands gives a great experience? All right, awesome. So you guys are great students here. All right, so I don't like sushi, but if you like sushi and I said to you I was going to buy you sushi, tell me which one of these places you go to for sushi if you're going to have sushi. Got a couple of Wegmans, a couple of Whole Foods. Nobody typed Walgreens in. Why didn't anybody type Walgreens? Why wouldn't we go to Walgreens for sushi? I'm not off my rocker. You don't have to type an answer to that. But I will tell you, If you've ever been up to New York City, Adam, okay, I agree with you. However, if you've been to Duane Reade is in New York City and Manhattan, owned by Walgreens, and Walgreens specifically bought this drugstore called Duane Reade in Manhattan, specifically because they were selling a lot of sushi out of a couple of their stores in Manhattan. So think about this. Nobody in their right mind would ever think to go to a drugstore for sushi. So how could a drugstore in Manhattan be successful selling sushi? Well, remember, the definition of value is know what problem you create or solve for the customer. So if you've ever spent any time in Manhattan, in downtown New York City in Manhattan, there's a lot of people on top of each other. There's a lot of office buildings when people are allowed to be in office buildings. So the problem that Walgreens solved was there's basically like a drugstore on every corner. There's a grocery store or a little corner convenience store in every corner. People don't have a lot of time for lunch. It probably takes 10 minutes just to get down the elevator. So they want something quick for lunch. That's why food trucks or food carts are really successful in urban areas, because there's a lot of people in a confined area. So again, I'm not crazy. I would say, in the middle of nowhere, nobody's going to go to a drugstore for sushi. But Walgreens was able to sell sushi in Manhattan specifically because it solved the problem for those consumers, All right, so who's getting all the buzz in food? Well, it doesn't begin with the letter W, right? It's obviously Amazon. And for those of you that are not familiar, Amazon bought Whole Foods about 5 years ago, which signaled to me that Jeff Bezos realized that he cannot be a pure play retailer with food. I mean, Amazon's kicking everybody's butt. Amazon's taking all over the world, but Amazon's taking over the world like Walmart took over the world 25 years ago. So think about that. Again, I know a lot of you all are young, but Walmart has only been selling food in the United States for about 30 years, not even 30 years. So 30 years ago, Walmart kind of came in and turned everything upside down. And now Amazon's coming in and turning everything upside down. So we need to understand how they work. We need to understand how they think. And again, you may decide to sell on Amazon, or you may decide not to sell on Amazon. That's a strategic decision that you all need to make. So if we think about food marketing and how the world has changed in the last 100 years, this is a picture of what a grocery store looked like 100 years ago. And again, for those of you that are old enough to remember, this is the Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, or A&P. And for those of us in the Northeast, A&P became Super Fresh about 25 years ago. And today, A&P is bankrupt. There are no longer any more A&P or Super Fresh stores. So they were once the largest retailer, food retailer in the world. Certainly in the United States, they had 4,000 stores between the Atlantic and the Pacific. But this is basically like a corner store. This is what a grocery store looked like 100 years ago. So we start here. And then again, 25 years ago, these guys kind of came in and shook up the whole grocery business. So they were able to sell consumers the same national brand products for less money. That's how Walmart kind of got in, same for less. And they changed the game. Then about 15 years ago, these guys went in the other direction. They went more for more. They said, hey, we think customer experience is really important. So we're going to give people great products and great service and a great atmosphere at a fair price. Not the lowest price, but not the highest price. And they kind of changed the game on what we call retail customer experience. And again, as we all know, in the last 5 years, these guys are really rocking and rolling here. So the question is, do we play with them or do we play against them? But this is a paradigm shift. I will not be alive to see this, but I guarantee in 25 years, there's going to be somebody that's going to do this better than Amazon. It just has to happen. Again, maybe it's not 25 years, but if history is any guide, somebody's going to come along and solve a problem better than these guys do now. And we'll be talking about that in 25 or 30 years. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about target market segmentation and positioning, and then we'll take like a 15-minute break. So I want to make sure we give everybody a chance to kind of stretch their legs. Mark is going to cover this in detail next week, a lot of detail next week. So I've talked about this a little bit already, but let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. So these are the ways that we segment customers: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. So again, I've already given you, examples of the who. That will be demographics, right? Those are descriptors: age, race, income, sex, education, where you live, where you work, the kind of job you have. The where can be retail segments. So typically the way we think about retailers are, we have dollar stores, we have value stores like Aldi, Save a Lot, Lidl, Bottom Dollar, Price Right. We have drugstores, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid. We have club stores, Costco, BJ, Sam's Club. We have mass merchandisers like Walmart and Kmart and Target, and in the Midwest there's a company called Meijer. And we have grocery stores: Acme, Wegmans, Giant, Whole Foods, ShopRite. And then finally we have convenience stores: Wawa, Quick Check, Royal Farms, Turkey Hill, Sheetz, Cumberland Farms, 7-Eleven, Circle K. They're the big ones. So we can segment based off of where. We can segment based off of when, or day part, purpose, frequency. Again, we have the breakfast day part, we have the lunch day part, we have the dinner day part, we have the snack day part. Now, for most people, breakfast is, let's say between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. But if you work night work, maybe breakfast is 10 o'clock at night, or maybe breakfast is 11 o'clock in the morning. So it can be day part. Maybe we have different behaviors on the weekdays than we do on the weekend. The why. Why are we buying this product? Are we a foodie? Do we like to cook our own food? Do we like fresh ingredients? Do we like to make everything we eat? Or do we have a busy lifestyle? We want convenience. So maybe on the weekend, I will buy ingredients and cook a meal. But during the week, I'm going to go through a drive-through, or I'm going to buy a frozen meal or something that I can heat and eat. How do we shop? What influences our purchase? And then what are we buying? So again, benefits, behaviors, characteristics. So again, let's talk about this behavior thing: heavy, medium, and light. If I think of beer, and somebody that consumes, let's say in a week, one person consumes a case of beer over the course of a week. So 7 days in the week, they're drinking 24 cans of beer. That's roughly about 3 cans a day. That would be considered a heavy user of beer. Maybe somebody that drinks a 6-pack a week might be considered a medium user, and somebody that drinks a can or less a week might be considered a light user. Well, obviously, if we can identify these people, even though they might not be a large percentage of people, they're going to create a lot of value for us because they're buying a lot of product. So we can segment based off of behavior. Again, think of people, people that are vegetarian or vegan are not going to buy meat products. People that are carnivores are probably not going to buy vegan products. So you need to understand this, okay? Then again, what benefit are we looking for? What problem is solved? I've just identified 4, but there's a lot more. Convenience, quality, freshness, value. And again, we can define value differently. Maybe value is quality. Maybe value is quantity. Maybe value is health. Maybe value is fresh. Maybe value is frozen. Maybe value is canned. Think about, again, when the pandemic hit last March, everybody ran out and stocked up on canned soup and canned items because they're good for a couple of years. We didn't know whether the world was going to end. We didn't know when we were going to be able to get out of our house. So value 15 months ago is different than value today. Now we've lifted the mask mandate. Everybody's going out. A lot of people are getting vaccinated. We're trying to get back to normal. So maybe value now is going out to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse or going out for $100 dinner to treat yourself. People define freshness a lot of different ways. Certainly people define quality a lot of different ways. And we can even talk about convenience. Wawa is a convenience store, but I don't think getting coffee at Wawa is convenient. You have to park your car and you have to get out of your car and you have to make your own coffee. You go to Starbucks, somebody makes the coffee for you. You go to Dunkin', somebody makes the coffee for you. Or you don't even have to get out of your car at McDonald's. You go through the drive-through. That's pretty convenient. And then finally, the descriptors. Again, gender, age, education, location, all that good stuff. So again, we put people into groups. We call that segmentation. Then we figure out who we're going after. That's the target market. And then we figure out what we want them to feel. Okay. So remember, a really hot target market today for retailers, for food retailers, are millennials. And I think I would include Gen Z. So again, anybody from 20 to 40. If your product appeals to that group, retailers should listen to you because you're going to bring new people into their store. So let's say the target market is that. Now, let's go in a whole different direction. Maybe the target market are people that live in a certain neighborhood. Maybe the target market are people that work in a certain area. So again, if you think of urban areas where a lot of office buildings are located, a lot of restaurants shut down because nobody was working in the cities. Now that we're opening the cities back up, people are coming back into the city, but people are still going to telecommute. And there's going to be a certain segment of people that never feel comfortable going back into the city. So who are we going to go after now? If you have a long-term lease on a restaurant in the city, maybe instead of trying to get people that work in the city to come to your restaurant, maybe you can get people that live in the suburbs to come to your restaurant, as an example. I'm not saying I would do that, but you need to understand who you're going to go after. And then finally, the positioning is, what do we want them to think of? So again, if you think of segmentation, it's taking large groups of people and putting them into smaller subsets. How can we target people? Again, how are they unique? Maybe it's, again, how we describe them, how they think, how they act, how they consume, or their attitudes. Some other criteria are size. How big is the market? Is it growing faster? Are there a lot of competitors? How big are the competitors? Do we think this is going to be a profitable segment? So when we do this session on market sizing and gap analysis in a couple of weeks, we spend a lot of time talking about this. How do we quantify how big the market is? And then finally, fit. Again, if you have an existing product or an existing company, does this fit with what you're doing? That doesn't mean if it doesn't fit, you don't do it, but you really need to understand what you're doing. For example, if you are thinking you're going to develop a line of gluten-free products, well, you certainly don't want to sell stuff that has gluten in it. Or if you sell stuff that has gluten in it, it can't be made in the same facility where you're making gluten-free. Or vice versa, you're baking breads or cookies or cakes or whatever, and now you want to get into gluten-free, you have to think about how you're going to do that. So positioning. When I think of positioning, it really, you need to understand how the consumer sees your product relative to other products. Positioning takes place in the mind of the consumer. It's perceived, the positioning is perceived value, not objective characteristics, it's perceived value. And the goal is always to occupy a clear, distinct, and desirable place in the mind of the consumer. So again, think back to coffee. And I say Wawa, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, Panera, McDonald's. Each one of those brands has a position in your mind that I have no idea how you guys think. But I guarantee there's some people out there who think that McDonald's is really good coffee for the price. It's definitely the cheapest coffee out there, right? It costs less than every other coffee, and it solves a problem for people. Wawa's a little more expensive than McDonald's. Dunkin's a little more expensive than Wawa. Starbucks is a lot more expensive than all of them. But each one of those brands solves a problem, and each one of those brands has a clear, distinct, and desirable place in the mind of the customer. So remember, once you segment people, different customers can have different perceptions. That's completely legit. So I am a 50-year-old white male with 3 adult children. I think differently about brands than a 38-year-old white male with young children. I think differently than a 58-year-old white male that doesn't have children. So there's a lot of different things, right? You can group me into male, you can group me into white, You can group me into professional. You can group me into suburban. There's a lot of different ways you can think about me. And you can see somebody that looks just like me, like an old white guy, but thinks totally different than I do because maybe they have young children, or maybe they have no children. And I'm a grandfather already. So this is what I'm talking about. When you think about positioning, it's a really difficult concept. Mark's going to spend a lot of time talking about this next week, but clear, distinct, desirable position in the mind of the consumer. So I'm a big Disney fan. And I will tell you, when you think about positioning, think about Tigger. You know, Tigger's one of Tigger's famous lines is, "I'm the only one." So when you're thinking about developing your brand promise, when you're thinking about developing your company name or your product or whatever, think about Tigger. How can you be the only one? If you have the best hot sauce, what makes your hot sauce different? And is that difference meaningful to consumers? So again, think about that. You're going up against Frank's and Tabasco and McElhenny and Cholula and all these other big brands. And then you're going up with smaller brands too. So maybe your brand is the hottest hot sauce. Maybe you use ghost peppers. Or maybe your story is that you are, it's a family recipe, or you've won cook-offs, or you've done whatever. But when you think about the positioning, how you position the product, it has to be different than other people. Great example of positioning is Swiffer. So I think most of you all are familiar with Swiffer. What does Swiffer, we'll close off with this and we'll take a break. What does Swiffer do different? What is Swiffer's differential advantage versus whatever you compare Swiffer to? Just jump in the chat and tell me what you think Swiffer does different. Yes, yes, yes. Easy to use, cordless, takes up space, convenient. Not the primary one that they're selling though. What's the difference between Swiffer and a mop? For those of you that have seen any of the communication on Swiffer. What does Swiffer do? Not messy, no bucket of water, less hassle. Yes, yes, yes. I'm assuming because we changed the pad, it's cleaner because we're picking the dirt up and we're throwing the dirt out. We're not squeezing a dirty mop into dirty water and pushing dirty water around the floor. Yes, Natalie, lighter to transport. So all those things. But if I said Swiffer's a mop, you guys would say, no, Swiffer's not a mop, because Procter & Gamble's done a great job of telling us what the difference is in Swiffer and why we need that. And think about what Swiffer's done. It started off with the dry dusting pad. Now they have Swiffer Wet Jet. They have Swiffer Wet. They have Swiffer to clean ceiling fans. They have a whole bunch of different Swiffers, right? That's the key. So when you think of differential advantage, it's you have to be different, but that difference has to be meaningful to people. Great, great, great. So when we think of positioning, again, it's a process, and Mark's going to spend a lot of time on this next week, but you have to think about how you want people to think about your brand. So here's how I think about positioning. To the target market, brand X is the frame of reference. That is the point of difference. So who we going after, that's the target market. What is our brand name, or category, whatever? What's the consumer frame of reference, and how will we different than the competition? I know this is pretty confusing, so I made it easier. To the person cleaning up the spill, that's our target customer. Bounty, that's our brand. Is the frame of reference paper towel? That is most absorbent. To the person cleaning up the spill, Bounty is the paper towel that is most absorbent. All right, let's see who can answer this the quickest. Bounty is the blank, blank, blank. Type it in the chat. Thank you, Shannon. And you didn't misspell it either. Wow, you guys are pretty quick typers. Quicker, picker, upper. Yes. That advertising has been around since the 1970s. I'm old enough to remember that. Quicker, picker, upper. Not proper grammar, not good English, but we all get it, right? Again, it doesn't matter whether you're old or young, black or white, rich or poor, educated or not educated. When somebody spills something, Bounty is going to pick stuff up better than dollar store paper towel. Now, let's change it around a little bit. To the Starving college student. So the target market is starving college student. Brand X is the paper towel that is cheapest. So what is brand X? Somebody type in the chat. Give me an example of brand X. Viva, great example. Even better than Viva, Brittany. Store brand, yes, yes, yes. Dollar Store Scott, great example. So if we think of something like a paper towel, we have brands like Dollar Store, which is the cheapest. Scott's pretty cheap. Viva's the next cheap. Bounty, and then we have a brand called Brawny. And Brawny doesn't say anything about quicker picker-upper. Brawny is strong. So Brawny's more durable. So Brawny might be used by a landscaper or a mechanic or somebody that works with their hands and gets their hands dirty. So even something like a paper towel, we can actually position in the mind of the consumer 5 brands totally different. Great, great, great. All right, so let's do this. I'm looking at my clock here. It is 6:23. Let's do a, let's say we'll do a 12-minute break, okay? So we'll be back at 6:35. So y'all can run and grab something to eat or maybe stop in the restroom, do what you need to do. So I am going to stop my video and I'll be back with y'all in 12 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So we're going to continue on here. I did want to stop though before I start the second piece here. Does anybody have any questions from the first part or anything you need me to spend a little more time explaining? If you could either jump on the chat or the Q&A and let me know. I'd be happy to do that before we start back up. Okay, great. So let's continue on a little bit here. So let's talk a little bit about retail segmentation and what consumers that are retail consumers, what they look for. Now, this was actually done. This list was done about 20 years ago by my executive education students. And I still think a lot of the things are still relevant today. So if we think of segmenting based off of benefits, you can read that list on the left. There's a lot of great things that people are looking for from a benefit standpoint. If we think of behaviors, those are behaviors that retail food marketing consumers exhibit. And of course, if we think about characteristics, those are certain characteristics that we've talked about. So again, if we think about somebody like a convenience store, people that shop at convenience store are certainly time-starved. They're probably not caring about quality. Convenience is more important than quality. Convenience is more important than price. Convenience is more important than variety. So if we think of those kinds of things, we can segment in a lot of different ways. So if you're familiar with Charles Revson, who started Revlon Cosmetics, he has a famous quote: "In the factory, we make cosmetics. At the counter, we sell hope." So think about what is your equivalent of selling hope. Or again, think about, when you were younger, when you were a teenager, or maybe in college or whatever, and you're going out on a date. And you take a shower, you put some makeup on, you put cologne on, you put a nice shirt on, and you look in the mirror and you say, boy, tonight's the night I'm going to meet my wife. Tonight's the night I'm going to meet my husband, whatever. That's the reason why the cosmetic companies make so much money, because it's the perceived value. Doesn't matter what we think the people see. When you look in the mirror, when you use a certain hair coloring or lipstick or cologne, or wear a certain kind of suit or shoe or earrings or whatever, it's your perceived value of why you're willing to spend more for that, okay? In the factory, we make cosmetics. At the counter, we sell hope. All right, so let's talk about value a little bit now. So think about onions. Didn't think you'd be talking about onions on a Wednesday night at 6:30. But think about onions. Does anybody have any idea what the average price of an onion is? Like if you went to the grocery store, what would you expect to pay per pound for an onion? You can type that in the chat. What do you think a fair price for onions is? 79 cents, a little low, Brittany, but close. Shannon, a little high, right? $1.49, but you guys are in the ballpark. $2.39, Polly, no way, not unless you're shopping at Whole Foods. All right. Great. All right, let's talk about that. So that's an onion. Let's say the onion's 99 cents a pound, right? We go to a store and we can buy onions for 99 cents a pound. Typically, they come in a crate. The crate looks like this. You walk up, you buy an onion, you put it in a bag, you put it on the scale, you weigh it, and it's whatever it is, 99 cents a pound. But now we're going to call these artisan onions. We're going to create this really nice display. We're going to put it in a colorful box and stack them. So maybe we can get more for this, especially because we're calling it artisan, sweet onions. Maybe it's how we merchandise it. So you go to a grocery store and everything looks really nice like this. Again, this would be a great example of experience. Nice looking store, nicely merchandised, nice floor, nice lighting, all that great stuff. So maybe we can get more money here for onions. Or maybe we're going to individually wrap the onion. We're going to leave the roots on there. We're going to leave the stalks on there. It has a nicer presentation. People hate peeling onions. So if we peel the onions and we put them in a container, maybe people are going to pay more for that because It's more convenient to have a peeled onion. It's even more convenient to have an onion that's already chopped and wrapped so we can't smell it. We're not going to cry when we're opening and peeling these onions. Maybe it's a brand name, and maybe we have different kinds of onions. And maybe they're diced, maybe they're fine diced, maybe they're different flavors or different varieties, different thicknesses. Or maybe they're smaller, and we show you a picture of the farm, Christopher Ranch. We can charge more for that. This is a great example of packaging. So this is called a gusseted package. And this would be one of those packages that can actually stand up because the bottom kind of flares out. So maybe we're paying more for how we present the product. And then, of course, if you've ever been to Outback and you get the bloomin' onion, this is probably like $10 now, maybe even more. So basically one onion, we're paying $10 for one onion. Or if we go to the salad bar and we put onions on the salad bar, we're paying whatever that price per pound is, $8 in this case, $8 a pound. Or maybe we get onion jam. So this is a little bottle of onion jam and Merlot wine. Boy, it must be good. We might pay $6 or $7 for this little bottle here, as an example. All right, so let's talk a little bit now about what's been going on in the last year. One of my least favorite words and my most favorite word is pivot. So Charles Darwin had a great quote, Origin of Species. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. So think about that, right? Think about the companies that have been able to change and react. Really important. Remember, customers only buy two things, good feelings and solutions to problems. All right, so let's talk about strategy now. These are, again, I call these my rules of strategy. And before I go through all these, let me say this. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with me that these are the right rules. So what I will tell you is make sure you have a set of rules that you believe in and follow those rules. These are just the things I've talked about and believed in for a long time. So the first one is leadership. And that's probably the most important of all the rules. I'll talk about that. The second is know what business you're in, know what problem you solve for the customer. The third one is you better know who your customers are. You better get close to them and stay close to them. Know who you're playing with and know who you're playing against. Do the unexpected. Don't tell people what you are doing. One of the benefits of being a small entrepreneur is nobody's going to pay attention to you. The big companies are not going to pay attention to you. Focus, 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 really important. And concentrate your resources. So one is efficiency and one is effectiveness. Focus and concentrate. Be mobile, which you should be if you're an entrepreneur, and advanced and secure. And I'll go through all these in detail. Leadership, as I said, most important of all the rules. Think of leadership as not a position, but a state of mind. Okay. And again, most of you are going to be entrepreneurs. You're going to have small companies, but hire people that have skills that you don't have. Hire people that are stronger than you in certain areas. So one of the things I say all the time as a leader, it's very easy to be tolerant of weakness. It's much more difficult to be tolerant of strength. Hire people that have skills that you don't have. Hire people that are smarter than you. Again, make your team really strong. Okay, I'm going to skip through some of these. I believe a leader is a preacher of vision and a lover of change. Now remember, I talked about a plan being really important. Yes, we have to have a plan. Yes, we have to implement the plan. Yes, we have to measure the plan, but a great leader knows when to make a change. So I used that word pivot earlier. We don't change every day. We don't change with the weather, but we have to be able to look at where we're going, put a plan together to get there. And if that plan takes us there, great. But if that plan does not take us there, we have to be able to the ability to make a change. So these are some skills that I think are really important leadership skills. Vision. You have to be able to look down the road. You have to be very robust. You have to take risks. Definitely competitive, bold and decisive, opportunistic. 7's really important for me, grace under pressure. So I've worked for a lot of people in my time that really folded under pressure. And again, remember, when you're the leader, you have to be calm. You have to remain calm as you can for as long as you can, because people take their cue from you. So if you're running around like a chicken without a head, they're going to run around with a chicken without a head. And obviously we have to be innovative, right? We have to see things, try things, and move quickly. So again, these are some examples of vision statements: pizza fast, pizza hot. So for those of you that are familiar with Domino's Pizza, I think it's really crappy pizza, but they don't tell people the pizza is great quality. They say, hey, if you want your pizza fast and your pizza hot, we're going to get it to you. If you think of them relative to Papa John's, better ingredients, better pizza, right? So Papa John's is talking about the actual product. These guys are talking about speed. Some iconic leaders, I think some of these guys have passed away, but some really iconic leaders in my mind. So leaders versus managers. Again, most of you start off, again, younger people, you're going to start off as managers. And I'm not saying that you can't have both sets of skills here, but typically we think of leaders as visionary, managers as rational. Leaders as passionate, managers as persistent. Leaders as creative, managers solving problems, flexible, tough-minded, inspiring, analytic. You can kind of go down the list here, okay? Figure out what skills you have, and then figure out what skills you need that you don't have and go acquire those skills. Know what business you're in. So remember back to Charles Revson, right? What you make in the factory may not be what people buy. Yes, Revlon makes cosmetics, but they're not selling cosmetics, they're selling hope. When I put that lipstick on, when I put that perfume on, when I put that mascara or eyeliner, it makes me feel good when I look in the mirror. When I feel good when I look in the mirror, I'm going to have a really positive attitude when I go out. I'm going to feel really good about myself. If I feel really good about myself, I'm going to feel really good about those brands. So understand what problems you solve for the customer. Here's a great one. Okay, this guy sells yachts in Fort Lauderdale. Now, obviously, yachts are a pretty expensive boat, but he says, hey, I don't sell boats. I improve people's lifestyles. Okay, I improve people's lifestyles. Ethan Allen, founder of Ethan Allen, helping people create beautiful home environments. Again, think about what happened in the last year. A lot of money was spent at Lowe's and Home Depot and all these home improvement stores because we couldn't go out, because we couldn't get on a plane, because we couldn't leave the country, we couldn't go on vacation. So people that had money decided to spend that money on fixing their house up. And this quote's from well before COVID, well before COVID. But think about that. Think about how many people took the money that normally would have went maybe into a car or a vacation and decided to spend money to fix their house up. They haven't gotten there yet, but CVS, Walgreens, and Rite Aid are trying to be a convenience store. They're definitely selling more convenience items. They're selling a little more prepared food, although I would argue they haven't gotten prepared food even close to being right yet. But think about that. If CVS or Walgreens or Rite Aid was able to sell things like breakfast sandwiches or coffee or things like that, they'd be a really big competitor to something like McDonald's and Wawa and convenience stores and things like that. Great quote, founder of Starbucks. I mentioned Disney before, and I think Disney is a great example of knowing what business they're in. So when I think of Disney, I think of these two words right here: family fun. Family fun, especially with the Disney logo. Now, Disney owns a lot of things that don't say Disney, but anytime you see the Disney name, it's generally around family fun, whether it's retail stores, cruise ships, magazines, theme parks, whatever, family fun. So when you think about understanding what fits under your umbrella, can you do it? Will the target market allow you to do it? Will the competition allow you to do it? And can you satisfy your organizational objectives? So you have to ask all these questions. So this one we're going to come back and talk about. Can I satisfy that? Find a niche in the market, then make sure there's a market in the niche, or find a gap in the market and make sure there's a market in the gap. So when you're thinking about the kinds of products you're going to have, when you're thinking about where you're going to sell your product, you need to identify some white space or some open space or a gap. You just have to make sure that that gap has a viable market there for you. And remember, you don't want to open up tents. You want to open up umbrellas. Think about this visual, okay? If we open up an umbrella, one person can stay dry under umbrella. If we put two people under the umbrella, we can't stay dry, but if each person has their own umbrella, then we can stay dry. So you're better off opening up more umbrellas and trying to fit everybody under one tent. Okay, let's talk about what's happening now in 2021. So I've mentioned millennials and Gen Z. They have the keys to the car and the kingdom. So I am 58 years old. I'm on the young side of the baby boomer generation. And for many, many, many years, we were it. Everybody cared about baby boomers. Now, interestingly, baby boomers still have all the money. So generationally, we have a lot of the wealth in our generation. So people from 58 to 75 years old, let's say. We still have a lot of the money, but now the food companies only care about millennials and Gen Z because they're the people who they have to get to come into the store. You may not be familiar with a concept called Omnichannel, but it's basically understanding how your consumer gets their information and making sure that you communicate with them how they get their information. So that's why we still have bricks and mortar stores. That's why we still have paper circulars, because some people still like a paper circular. That's why we have apps. That's why we have websites. That's why we have social media. That's why we have all these platforms. So omnichannel basically is everything. You want to communicate with people how they want to be communicated. The third screen is now the first screen. So I'm going to hold my phone up. Even older people are using this before they go to a tablet, before they go to a laptop, before they go to television. Again, we all have televisions in our house, but think about how we get our information. A lot of people are using this phone for information. From a retail standpoint, stores get smaller. So I mentioned Walmart before. For 25 years, from let's say, from around 1990 till maybe 2005, 2006, everybody was getting bigger. Retailers were buying other retailers, manufacturers were buying other manufacturers, companies were getting bigger, stores were getting bigger because we had to compete with Walmart, one-stop shop. Now, stores are getting smaller because people don't want to go into a Walmart and walk up and down a 100,000 square foot store to get stuff. So they want to get in and get out. That's why dollar stores are kicking butt. Aldi, Price Right, Lidl, Save-A-Lot, kicking butt. Smaller stores. Now you cannot do all of your grocery shopping in a dollar store, but you can go in and get a couple items in a dollar store and get in and out of a dollar store a lot faster than Walmart. And then finally, experience is king. And I talked about that. However you define experience is king. So this would be a great example of trends or that external analysis that I talked about. This is the quote that I mentioned before. Great quote from Sam Walton. A customer is not your customer until he is a repeat customer. So what do consumers want? Well, people want relevancy. Is this product for me? They want to know what they're buying. They want to be, it's got to be simple. Remember that Albert Einstein quote. And it's got to be a great experience. Okay. Benefits received, burdens endured. All right. Know your playing field. So what do consumers want? Well, these are four things that I think are timeless consumer drivers. Again, think about why you make the choices you make with regard to food. Maybe it saves you time. Maybe it saves you money. Maybe it makes you feel good. Maybe it entertains you. Maybe it's a healthy choice. But these are four key consumer drivers. So again, when we're thinking about how do you approach change? Well, figure out what areas are changing. Characterize the change or trend, short-term, long-term, fad or not. Figure out what the marketing implications are. What's the so what? What are you going to do with that information? How are you going to use that information? And then develop a marketing response, either product change, pricing change, communication change, distribution change. Know who you're playing against. Who is the competition? Okay. Customers and consumers, not you, determine who the competition is. Again, think about when COVID hit. We could only get our food from certain stores. And people that had, a little bit of income had to decide whether they were going to go to a grocery store, a Walmart, a convenience store, or maybe instead of buying food, they were going to go to Home Depot and buy something for their house. So the customers and consumers determine who the competition is, not you. All right, let's talk about, secrecy or do the unexpected. So again, think about creating a product. Think about what you're going to do. Maybe you talk to consumers, maybe you talk to retailers. Don't tell anybody what you're doing until you do it. That's what we're talking about here, right? All right, focus, focus, focus. So this is the effectiveness piece, right? We talked about efficiency, which is concentrate your resources, effectiveness, which is focus. What do you want to accomplish? Know the objective, quantify the objective, stay with the objective. You're going to hear me talk about this concept called SMART objective in a little bit, okay? SMART objective. So when we talk about focus, think about the single most important thing you can do to accomplish your strategy. And start with that and focus on that. So I like to talk about maybe the rule of 3. Don't have any more than 3 objectives. If you have 10 objectives, you're not going to be successful. Now let's talk about efficiency. Concentrate your resources, whether they're human resources, capital resources, financial resources. Put your money and your people where it makes a difference. Concentrate your resources at the point of attack. So I like to say the way I think about this is I put my best people on my biggest opportunity, not my biggest problem. Remember one of my early slides, I'm a really positive person. I'm a half full, not a half empty. So if you have somebody that's really, really, really good, put them on your opportunity. I guarantee you'll be more successful putting your better people on your better opportunity, not your, not your biggest problem. And again, we talk about strengths and weaknesses. Identify what your strengths and weaknesses are. Focus on your strengths. Minimize your weaknesses. All right, be mobile. So this is where we talk about, the word pivot again. It's really hard to hit a moving target. So make sure that you're kind of flowing where the people are. You're flowing where the people might be. Okay. Everything's changing. So maybe if you can identify a trend before other people identify the trend and capitalize on that, and you position your product before your competition does, you're going to be more successful. You need to change your strategy and tactics as the situation dictates. And then advance and secure means at some point you have to take the offensive. Okay, but generally when we go on the offense, sometimes we fail. So we have to have a safe haven to fall back to. So think about that. Think about if you climb a tree and you're standing on a branch and you're holding the tree trunk pretty secure. If you take a step out, maybe you can only put your arm around the tree trunk, less secure. If you take another step out, now you're kind of balancing on that tree trunk, on that limb, less secure. So always have a place to go back to if you can. We call that advanced and secure. So ask yourself, are you exhibiting leadership? Do you understand what problems you solve for the customer? Have you considered what's going on outside of your control? Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? Do you know your competition's strengths and weaknesses? Do you have objectives? Are you focusing on the objectives? Are you concentrating your resources? So again, remember what I said before I shared my goals with you. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with my rules. Make sure you have a set of rules that you believe in, okay? You want to work smart, not hard. Yes, we're always going to have to work hard to start, but the goal is to work smarter. The goal is to outthink the competition. You are not going to be able to outspend bigger companies. And obviously the goal is to win the war, not the battle, right? Long-term, not short-term. So again, have a set of rules you understand, have a set of rules you believe in, follow them, and I guarantee you'll be a winner. And remember, when you're thinking about strategic alternatives, does it fit with what you're currently about? Do you have objectives? Do you have quantifiable objectives? Is it consistent with what you found looking outside the company? Is it feasible with what you know inside the company? Are you able to build on a competitive advantage? Are you vulnerable to change in the environment? What are the rewards? And what's the appropriate level of risk? So you may have heard the concept of risk and reward, really important here. And you need to be able to measure to manage, okay? You need to be able to measure to manage. All right, let me stop there. Any questions on the rules of strategy? Any questions? Please type them in the Q&A or the chat. All right, great. All right, so let's spend the rest of our time here really talking about the outline, the food marketing strategy outline. And again, you will have access to this PowerPoint. This is, again, it's not a detailed plan. This is just an outline, but this is a great slide for those of you that are thinking about starting a business to come back to. So the first thing we start off with, as I said, is that external analysis. So let's talk about a couple of things here. Let's spend a little bit of time here. So external, again, are things that are outside of your company and outside of your control. And the four big areas I always like to think about, I call it a pest analysis: political, economic, social, technology. So let's go through each of these and talk about that a little bit. Think about what is happening in the world today. Think about what is happening in the United States today. So in January, we had a change in the leadership in the White House. We also had a change in leadership at the Senate, not the House. So right now, the Democrats control the White House, they control the Senate, and they control the House. So whether you're Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or whatever, it doesn't matter. You need to think about, does the current political landscape benefit you or hurt your business? So I'll give you a couple of examples. Typically, Republicans are pro-business more so than Democrats. Typically, Democrats spend more on taxes than Republicans. Typically, Democrats have more regulations around things that involve food than Republicans. So again, whether you personally agree or disagree with that, you need to think about how that's going to impact what you're doing positively or negatively. And you could also take this down to a state level and a local level. So if you're thinking about starting a business in a town or city, you need to understand who controls that town or city from a political standpoint. You need to understand all the rules and regulations that you have in that municipality, then in that city, then in that state, and then in the United States. So again, the federal government regulates a lot of food things, but the states also regulate a lot of food things. And then we have townships and cities and counties and all that. So you really need to understand what the political landscape is. Economy. I have no idea what's going on with the economy. I am shocked that the stock market is as high as it is now. So you need to get your crystal ball out and figure out, do you think the economy is going to continue to grow, or do you think we're in for a correction? And based on that answer might determine whether you're going to do something or not do something, or where you're going to do something or not do something. So again, I kind of come back to think about the people that had businesses in urban areas like New York City or Philadelphia or Chicago or Boston. That real estate costs a lot of money because there's a lot of people in a small area. So those people were really good at getting a lot of people in the store, which is why the rents were higher, but they also made a lot of money. Nobody could have predicted that we were going to shut the country down. Nobody could have predicted that companies were going to allow people to work remotely. So now, if you have a long-term lease in an urban area, you're not going to get all that business back. You're probably not going to be able to lower your lease. So the question is, would you go into a big city? If so, why? If not, why not, right? So that's an example of the economy. On the flip side, what's happened over the last year is I think the divide has gotten bigger. So the people that are wealthy actually have more money because the stock market went up, because people's retirements went up. We have a little bit of inflation going on now, so wages are going up. So you need to think about the economy and how that either positively or negatively impacts you. Again, if we think about it from a retail standpoint, typically when the economy sinks, people shop more at grocery stores because they have less money. They're worried about losing their job. They're worried about stretching money. When the economy is growing, people are going out and having dinner at restaurants. Maybe they're having dinner at a better restaurant. Maybe they're spending more money on prepared foods. So that's an example of economic. Social media is a big part of that, but think about how the world has changed from a social standpoint. Older people are more used to face-to-face communication. Older people are used to different ways of communicating versus younger people. So again, we're going to do the generational divide here. People under 30 live on their phone. People over 30 use their phone. They don't live on their phone. And I'm making a general statement here from an age standpoint, but social is really important. Think about the other things that are going on in society. Think about a lot of the things we've been talking about. Diversity and inclusion, really important. Think about those kinds of trends. Think about a lot of the political divide that's going on. And it's a shame because we're trying to kind of divide the country on political lines here, but that's also impacting our social piece as well. So think about all those things that have happened in the last year. The social unrest. Do we think that's going to continue? If we're able to identify problems and opportunities that come out of that, then maybe we can develop products or services or open our store up or do different things or go after different consumers. So again, we cannot control what's happening with social trends, but we need to understand what's happening with social trends. And then finally, technology. Technology is here to stay. So most of you probably have a smartphone. Most of you probably have some kind of voice activated device in your house. Most of you probably have a satellite service or streaming service or whatever. Just think about how we're getting our information differently today than we were before. Tom, if you have a question, please type it in the chat or the Q&A. Be happy to answer that. So again, external are things that are outside of your control, but you really need to think about this in detail. And again, a lot of this you can look at on your own anecdotally, or you can do a little bit of research and start reading different publications. Again, depending on what your product is, there are food publications that focus specifically on different categories. There are food publications that focus specifically on different retailers or different consumers. So think about that. Do some reading. All this stuff is free. A lot of free resources on the internet, a lot of free publications you can go to. So that's what's happening outside of your company. Then internal, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. You have to be able to say where you're good and where you're weak and acquire that skill. So this one's really important too. Are you going to self-fund your business Are you going to borrow against your house? You're going to borrow money from your parents? You're going to go to the bank? They're going to want to know if you know what's going on outside and if you're able to identify where you're good and where you're weak. Okay. So this situation analysis typically is the first thing we talk about. And I call these things macro trends. Macro trends. So you're looking at what's happening out here. Again, think about things like gluten-free, paleo diet, keto diet, people that are eating less sugar, people that are vegan or vegetarian, plant-based protein. A lot of different things going on now, right? That you can't control, but you might be able to capitalize on. So then you do something called a SWOT analysis. And remember, strengths and weaknesses are internal, opportunities and threats are external. So identify your competition, identify what you do better than your competition, identify what your competition does better than you. From your external analysis, what are opportunities to your company and what are threats? Then I would go through that rules of strategy assessment. So go back and take a look at, again, my 10 rules of strategy, or develop your own rules of strategy and assess yourself on each of those rules. Again, you're not going to get an A for all 10 rules. Where are you good? Where do you need help? And then go off and get that help. And then from that, you identify something called a strategic issue. Remember, the key word here is strategic. If I don't answer this question, I am going to go out of business, or I'm going to have a problem being successful. So that's called a strategic issue. Then you want to develop SMART objectives. How will you measure success? And I'll give you an example of a SMART objective in a bit. And then you develop your marketing recommendations. How are you going to win? So you have to do all this stuff before you develop your products. Think about your pricing strategy. Think about your communication strategy. Think about your distribution strategy. This is the quote that I had before. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You have to have a plan. So this is just an outline. Again, this is not the only outline you can follow. This is what I've been doing for a long time, and I believe in this outline. So let me stop there. Any questions on this? Okay. So let's go a little deeper for each of these. How did the events of the past few months affect you? Is it positive or is it negative? Again, think about where you are personally. Think about opportunities for you, maybe from a gender standpoint, from an ethnicity standpoint, from a racial standpoint. Use them to your advantage. I will tell you, in the last 15 months, there's been a lot of money at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level for food businesses. Food was really significantly negatively affected. There's people that went out of business that are never going to come back in business. But there's also a whole bunch of people that were able to get money to stay in business. And there's a whole bunch of people that are able to get money to start a business. So one of the things I talked about earlier, I would encourage all of you to connect with the SBDC. Again, if you're in the Philadelphia, Southeastern Pennsylvania area, you can use Temple Services. They have free consulting. They have free advisors. You'll have your own advisor. So you can get into a conversation with them about funding, about grants, about business plan writing, about grant writing, a whole bunch of different things. Make sure you avail yourself of that. But use things to your advantage. How will you fare in good and bad economies? And again, think about where we're going. If you think the economy is going to grow, maybe you can take advantage of that. If you think the economy is going to contract, maybe you can take advantage of that. What social trends support your position? And maybe what social trends hurt your position? How can technology help or hurt you? So again, you want to take a look at each of these with a very detailed lens and say, here's how this helps me. Here's how this hurts me. And you're able to multiply. I mean, you're able to change your 4 Ps. Maybe change your product strategy, maybe change your packaging, maybe change your formulation, maybe change your pricing strategy, communicate differently, distribute differently. There's a whole bunch of different things you can think about there. So again, on the internal, where are you great and where are you weak? And you have to be very objective. So maybe in this case, this is an opportunity to get somebody that you really trust that's going to give you their honest opinion and say, what do you think of my idea? What do you think of my leadership skills? What do you think of my sales skills, my marketing skills, my cooking skills, whatever? And go off and acquire those skills that you don't have. Remember, surround yourself with people that are better at things than you, and that'll make you better. So when I think of a SWOT analysis, I think of a grid like this. So again, think about listing 2 or 3 or 4 strengths. These are internal. Think about listing 3 or 4 weaknesses. These are internal. From your external analysis, identify 3 or 4 opportunities and identify 3 or 4 threats. And then what you want to do is match up either strengths and opportunities, right? That's an SO strategy. You want to match up weaknesses and opportunities. So you're going to overcome weaknesses by taking advantage of opportunities. Maybe you want to go against strengths and threats. So use something you're good at to avoid a threat from the competition. Or you want to use a weakness threat, minimize weaknesses and avoid threats. So the way I think about this, again, back on my positive, I would probably go here first. If you have something that you've identified as a strength, and you have something that you've identified as an opportunity, well, this is too positive, right? This is low-hanging fruit. You should be able to execute this because you're good at it, and it's an opportunity. Conversely, when I'm doing my competitive analysis, if I'm going to be attacked by my competition, my guess is the competition is going to attack me on a weakness. Why would they attack me on a strength? Think about that again, for those of you that have an athletic background. Think about that, and this is where I think Bill Belichick, again, does a great job. He goes and just kills people on their weakness, but he also tries to take away their strength too. So sometimes it's a little bit of both. So think about which of these 4 fit. But the key here is to identify 3 or 4 strengths, identify 3 or 4 weaknesses, again, opportunities and threats, and then kind of match these up in this grid here. So this would be something, again, I would tell you when you go to see a bank or you go to sit down with a family member or a friend or whatever, you're going to need to show them that you've thought through this process. And this is a great example of doing that. So when I think of the rules of strategy assessment, I would do this with your stakeholders. So remember CEO, customers, employees, owners, communities, and social trends, right? So go back to that CEO model. This is everybody. Talk to as many people as you can. Clearly, some rules are going to be more important than other rules based on where you are. So again, think about ones you're good at, emphasize them. Think about ones you're weak at and go back and fix those. Strategic issues. What are the key questions you need to answer to ensure long-term success? So when I think of things that are strategic, it has long-term consequences. If I don't solve this problem, I'm going to be out of business. When I think of strategic issues, I think of significant commitment of resources, money, time, and people, or all 3. When I think of strategic issues, I think of things that are cross-functional. So functional are things like marketing and finance and accounting and engineering and human resources and operations and legal, cross-functional. So again, it crosses over all areas of your organization. When you think of strategic issues, they should clearly define the problem and then lead into your SMART objectives so that everyone in your company and everyone outside your company understands what's going on. So what's a SMART objective, or how are you going to measure success? A SMART objective is specific, it's measurable, it's aggressive yet attainable, It's realistic and it's time bound. So that's how we get SMART: specific, measurable, aggressive, realistic, time bound. And this is how you hold everyone accountable. So specific: I am going to introduce 3 new products in the next year. I am going to get a meeting with ShopRate in the next 3 months. Specific, measurable, aggressive, realistic, time bound. Or if you have an existing business, you're going to increase sales in the next year. You're going to increase profits X% in the next year. You're going to expand your brand to another state. You're going to take your product to another category. You're going to take your product to another retailer, channel. Specific, measurable, aggressive yet attainable, realistic, and time bound. Really important, SMART objectives. This is how you're going to measure, right? This is the focus and the concentrate your resources. Okay, now we get to the fun part. Not that that stuff wasn't fun already. So this gets to the how, the marketing recommendations. Who are you going after? And what do you want them to think of when they hear your product or brand? What is your product strategy? What are you going to do to your product? What kind of product are you going to develop? What kind of packaging? What kind of shelf life? What kind of ingredients? Are you going to make it yourself? Or are you going to have somebody else make it? Are you going to make it yourself in a commercial kitchen? Are you going to buy your own business? So those would be product decisions. We spend a lot of time talking about that in the new product section. How are you going to price your product? So go back to that economic value proposition. I will tell you that most people that I consult for, I always tell them to start off with a more for more. Start off with a premium product at a premium price. Tell people why your product is different and better and costs more than the competition. And the reason why I like to start off with more for more is because it's a lot easier to go down than it is to come up. In other words, you can go from more for more to more for same or same for less. A lot easier than you can go from more for less. It's very difficult to go more for less. Okay. So how are you going to price? If you have a lot of competition, you need to think about that. If you have no competition, you need to think about that. You need to think about where you're going to sell your product. For example, convenience stores expect a higher margin than grocery stores. Grocery stores expect a higher margin than Walmart and Target. Costco, BJ's, and Sam's Club, they expect lower margins than everybody else. So if you're going to sell your product to a Costco or BJ's or Sam's Club, they're willing to accept a lower profit margin because those companies make their money off of selling memberships, not selling product. So you need to understand where you're going to sell it to figure out how you're going to price it. Then you need to figure out how you're going to communicate. What's your promotional strategy? And I have consumer and trade there. So when you think of consumer promotion, those would be things like advertising, social media, public relations, the internet, digital. How are we going to communicate? Trade promotion is if you sell your product to a retailer, you have to give that retailer incentive to sell your product. So anytime you see something on sale in a grocery store or a Walmart or a Costco or whatever, that manufacturer has reduced the price of their product to that retailer for a certain amount of time. And in return, that retailer will reduce the price of the product to the end consumer. So you need both a consumer promotion strategy and a trade promotion strategy. And then finally, you need a place strategy or distribution strategy or supply chain. How are you going to make it? How are you going to deliver it? And where will consumers buy it? So again, for those of you that are thinking about this and maybe you've made products in your kitchen, people know and love your products. You cannot make products in a private kitchen in your house, unless you get that kitchen certified as a commercial kitchen. So you need to either go to a place that has a commercial kitchen, or you need to go lease space in a commercial kitchen, or you need to go lease a building and put commercial equipment in, or you need to go to a co-packer or somebody else to have them make your product. So you really need to think about how you're going to make it, where you're going to make it, when you're going to make it, how you're going to deliver it, where you're going to store it. If it's perishable, you need a refrigerated space, you need freezer space. Maybe you need dry storage in a controlled temperature environment. Again, it was 95 degrees out today. So you can't just put your stuff in a storage locker if heat's going to impact your product. So these would be all things you need to think about from a marketing strategy outline standpoint, okay? And again, each of these, if you're actually going to write this, or if you're actually going to develop a PowerPoint, this could be like, 10, 15, 20 slides if you're doing a PowerPoint to do this. So let me stop there again and see if we have any questions, because we have plenty of time for questions. So we do have a good amount of time left. I'd like to have some dialogue with you all. If you have a question, please go in the Q&A or please go in the chat. Pretty quiet group tonight. Okay. All right, so let me kind of come back and talk a little bit about all the other resources that SBDC has for you. And again, what we're focused on now is the food business series, which is food, but they have a whole bunch of other webinars, which are awesome webinars if you're thinking about starting your own business. So I've talked about the individual consulting. They will not give you money, but they can help you find out where the money is. They can help you with clinics. They can help you with shared resources, training programs, so on and so forth.
George, I think we have a few questions.
I do see that. Great. Okay. So is that Holly? I see. Where can we go for guidance on how to get a commercial kitchen ready for inspection? Well, if you have a kitchen or commercial kitchen already, somewhere it should already have food safety inspections and health inspections. So one thing I tell people all the time, and when we talk about the new products webinar, I'll give you a couple of resources there. But if you're in the Philadelphia area, there are a couple of places that actually rent out commercial kitchen space. So you can actually go rent space on an hourly basis, on a day basis, on a whatever. They already have all the certifications. If you are starting your own business in, let's say, Philadelphia, you have to go to licenses and inspections, and they have to come out and check your building out. There's certain requirements for what kind of equipment to put in. There's certain requirements for fire safety. There's certain requirements for food safety. So I think you need to think about that kind of stuff. That's a great question. But again, you can get some of that information certainly from the advisors at SBDC, and you can get that other stuff if you just go on and check out, other resources in Philadelphia to do that, or wherever y'all are from.
And we have another in the Q&A tab.
Great, Natalie. Okay. If I plan to sell non-perishable prepackaged food, would I need a commercial kitchen to produce that, or is that under different regulations? So the answer to that, Natalie, is yes. And the reason why you do not want to cook things in your house is because if you have any kind of food problems, food safety problems, if you have any kind of consumer issues or lawsuits, you could lose everything. So this is the third series of webinars we're doing. When I did this back in January, now again, think about where we were in January. We were still kind of not locked down, but there was a young lady who was a chef who was actually cooking things in her apartment building, and DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats were actually picking up at her apartment building. Not a good thing, because again, if somebody gets sick, they're going to trace it back to that. And she's going to say, I made it in my apartment, and she could lose everything. So that's one of the reasons why you want to do that, is from a food safety standpoint, but also from a legal standpoint. to protect yourself. The other thing I will tell you, and I am not a lawyer, but if you're going to start your own business, make sure you get some professional help and make sure that you are protected legally, either through an LLC corporation or an S corporation or a limited partnership. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do to set your business up, but that protects your personal assets. So I would definitely do that and definitely think about that. Great question. Keep them coming.
I have also put a link in the chat. So it's a link to the survey. Please make sure that you fill the survey because that is required by funders, the Small Business Administration, so that we can continue to provide no-cost webinars. And I have also posted a link to our resource page. So you can go in there and see which webinars we have, and you can register for that. I will also put in a link to the office hours session, which we have tomorrow.
Yeah, let me, while Divya is doing that, let me kind of just go through. I only have a couple slides left here, and again, we'll open it up again for Q&A. But please fill out that survey. It's really, really important, again, for us to get funding to keep doing this. So next week, for those of you that are here for the first time or kind of started a little late last time, this is what we're going to talk about next week. Brand strategy. We're going to spend a lot more time talking about segmentation, target marketing, positioning. It's that important. It's that important. You really need to understand your customers and consumers. So Mark's going to talk about creating a brand strategy that provides long-term platform. Mark's going to spend a good amount of time talking about consumer behavior, how people used to think, how people think now, and maybe how people are going to think in the future. And then we'll help you write that positioning statement. Then the week after that, for those of you that have a product ready to sell, or for those of you that are thinking about how you might sell your product, I'll be back in a couple weeks and we'll talk about sales presentation best practices. We'll talk about what's important to retailers, again, acquisition, retention, development, trips, basket size, margin versus turnover. Maybe you don't know what those words are. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about this concept of fact-based selling, how to tell your story, the concepts of category management, and then features, advantages, benefits. So we do a whole webinar on how to sell. Behind that, I do a whole webinar on sales forecasting, market sizing, trying to figure out how big the market is, and then gap analysis. So again, if you're thinking about an idea or an opportunity, this would help you kind of quantify what that might be and how you measure success. Then behind that, we do a whole session on pricing. How much should you charge for a product? So we spend almost the whole time on that economic value proposition. We talk about cost of sales. We talk about what kind of raw materials. We'll do a little bit of projection on inflation. We'll talk about what it costs to get your product to retail. And then we'll also talk about what retailers' expectations are if you're thinking about selling your product. After that, Mark comes back and we talk about brand identity, packaging, and advertising. This is an awesome session. So one of my colleagues, Jeff Marshall, who's a graphic designer, he kind of comes on and does a whole thing about graphic design, how we design packages. This is a great session for those of you guys that maybe already have a product or maybe you have some kind of concept in the office hours. Jeff would be happy to kind of evaluate what you have, or at least give you some guidance on how you might want to do your packaging, color combinations, food photography, all that great stuff. So we do a whole session on that. Mark does a whole session on marketing, communication, social media, and influencers. We actually have a young lady, Emily Rowland, that we work with. She's actually our social media expert. So she kind of comes in and talks about the role of marketing communications, the pros and cons of different kind of social media sites, paid versus owned versus earned media. So again, most of you probably have no idea what this is, but I guarantee all of you see this when you're on your social media. So paid would be ads that pop up that people are paying to have ads pop up. Owned are things that you do and you own that you buy. And then earned are things that people share. So Emily, we spend a whole hour and a half on kind of this piece here. That's marketing, communication, social media, and influencers. And then Mark and I kind of come back together and we talk about create and retain. So we talk about consumer promotion, and trade promotion. Really great session. Then the last session we have is new product development. And that won't be for another 8 weeks, but we're going to do webinars now over the next, this week and over the next 8 weeks. But we talk about how you develop new products. So again, for those of you that have the germ of an idea, this is a great session for you to come back to and talk about that. Attributes versus benefits, products versus packaging, recipes, ingredients, nutritional. Again, we don't get into a lot of legal stuff, but we'll show you enough things to get you started on the process. And then generally we have somebody from the food science area. I am not a food scientist. So generally we have somebody from the food science area that kind of comes in, and then we talk about how to manage a new product. And then after that, which I don't have a slide on here, the very last thing we have, which won't be till September, we actually do a boot camp. So after we go through the next 8 weeks, you actually have the opportunity to spend basically a whole day with us. So it's usually Mark and myself. Sometimes we'll bring a third person in. We spend the morning kind of helping you develop your plan. Or if you already have a plan, we kind of help you evaluate the plan and kind of refine the plan. And then in the afternoon, you get the opportunity to pitch your product to myself and Mark. And sometimes, as I said, we bring a third person in to evaluate. And then everybody gets to see that. So the cool part with that, it's almost like Shark Tank without the financials. So you get a chance to see what other people are pitching, other people's ideas. And again, it's a very interactive process. So those are all the webinars that are coming up. As I said, we're starting off next week with the brand piece. And it's just some key points to remember. And I see we have a couple of questions. We'll come back and wrap up with that. So understand what marketing is. Marketing is the facilitation of exchange. Understand the 3 value disciplines. How do you create value? Operational excellence. Again, remember the examples we used there were Walmart and Wawa and McDonald's. Customer intimacy. The example I used there was Amazon. They know their customers better than anybody. And product leadership, the example I used there was Apple, but there's many other examples. So when you're thinking about how you create value, think about it in one of these 3 ways. Understand if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. Think about where you are now. So this is your own scorecard. Where do you want to go and when? How are you going to get there? And how are you going to determine success? And again, I know a lot of you don't even have a plan. Just start writing your thoughts down on paper. It's really important to get stuff down on paper. Don't forget perception's reality. Don't forget there's always going to be markets for products that some people like a lot, not that everybody likes a little. Please don't forget the money slide, the most important slide. Who you are, what you do, how you're different, why you're better. So a lot of people kind of focus on this. It's your story. And yes, this is important. The who you are and what you do is really important, but you have to be different. And that difference has to be meaningful to customers and consumers. Figure out where you want to be on the economic value proposition. Remember, the only place you can never make money is in the middle. You cannot be same for same. So you need to figure out which of these blocks on the outside you are going to go into and why. Understand how to segment, right? From a behavior standpoint, from a benefit standpoint, from a descriptor standpoint. Understand who the market is you're going after. And it's okay to have multiple targets. So you can have a primary target market and you can have a secondary target market. And again, understand what you want people to think about when they see your product or service. So let me go back here because that is all I have. I think we have a couple of questions in the chat. All right, so Leah, let's talk about this a little bit. And again, if you have any other questions, please type them in the chat or the Q&A. So Divya has a couple links in the chat. One is to access the resources. Tomorrow night from 6:30 to 8:30. So if you have specific questions or maybe you don't feel comfortable, in a big public setting, identifying what you're doing, I will be online tomorrow night from 6:30 till 8:30. It is a separate link. Divya sent us the link out for you. Typically what happens in the office hours, I think we have like 20 people on tonight. Usually there's only a couple people that come in the office hours and I can have a much deeper conversation with you. Obviously, there's 5 people waiting to talk. I want to try to get through everybody, but we can have a more detailed discussion, certainly in the office hours, and I'm happy to help with that. That is also tomorrow night, 6:30 to 8:30. All right, Kim had a question. Kim, yes. So you can pop in and pop out. I will be online from 6:30 till 8:30. And again, you can come in and come out as many times as you want. You want to come on at 6:30, you can't get on until 7 o'clock, not a problem at all. That's for the benefit of everybody. Can you apply for loans and grants before you register your business? That's a difficult one, Jasmine. The answer to that is probably yes, because it's going to be a process, but it really depends on the grants specifically. So sometimes there's requirements that you have to show a business ID, you have to show a tax ID. I'll give you an example. With COVID, around restaurants, you actually had to either show your tax returns or you had to show that you had a material impact on a negative material impact on your business. There was another grant out there called the Payroll Protection Program, where they gave restaurants, they gave actually not just restaurants, but businesses, the ability, they gave them money to hire people back. And in that case, you had to show how many people you had working for you, how much you paid them. It didn't have to be the same people you brought back, but you had to bring, more people, the same amount of people or more people back. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund was a grant that was just out there, and you had to show that you were material impacted. Pennsylvania actually had grants where you had to show either tax returns or income statement or both. So generally, I would say you should have a business set up before you apply for that. But again, it doesn't hurt to call and ask people and talk to people. I would definitely tell you to avail yourself of the advisors at the Temple SBDC for sure when you do that. It's a great question. Other questions? All right, well, listen, it's been a pleasure meeting you guys remotely. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. I can talk to you face to face, and I'll let Divya close us out here. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you found it.
Thank you so much. Yep, people have found this as a very helpful webinar. Thanks to you, George. And thank you everyone for joining.
Have a good night, everybody. Divya, I'll see you tomorrow night.
Yeah, sure. Bye-bye.